Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Butterfly Effect podcast. I'm Jack, and I'm joined once again by Liam.
Thank you again for having me.
And today we're going to be talking about the things we'd like to see in the future games by Supermassive Games. Obviously, we've just finished House of Ashes. It's only been out for a week, but we've spotted some things that we feel could be tweaked, ready for the devil in me and in the future.
Yeah, definitely. So, before we crack on with this video, we want to just put a disclaimer out there that although this is a fairly negative video where we're picking out flaws or things we'd like to be improved by Supermassive Games, we just want to say for the record that we love Supermassive Games. We think they're a brilliant studio. They're possibly our favorite or one of our favorites. And although we're going to be fairly negative, picking out flaws and points, we're not trashing the games whatsoever. This is things we'd like to see different, room for improvement, but no game's perfect. And this is just simply us saying what we'd like to see better.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both agree that this was sort of like a 7, 8 out of 10 game. And what we're saying is that our suggestions will hopefully take it to a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 game in the future. So, okay, we'll start with number one. Now, I'm a self-confessed completionist. I've been going back through House of Ashes and I've been trying to complete all of the achievements. I believe I've got one left at this point. And I've got to say it's been a bit of a slog. And I think one of the ways that they could cater to the completionists in the future is by either introducing a skip cutscene feature in-game, or at the very least having a setting that maybe you could switch on in the menu, so even those in their first playthrough can skip the cutscenes if they want to. Is that something that you've noticed, mate, when you've been playing this?
Yeah, definitely. So if you asked any of my mates in my hometown, they would tell you that I am the trophy hunter of the group. I'm obsessed with it. And as you know, I've not got any from the Dark Pictures anthology. It took me about 5 years to platinum Until Dawn, because I just struggled to play through it again and again and again. But yeah, Man of Medan, House of Ashes, Little Hope. I look at the trophy list and I see the amount of playthroughs it's going to require. And I'm put off doing it, especially when there's a lack of reward for it. And I like a challenge. It's not like, I'm glad it's hard. I'd probably prefer that than it being super easy. But I look at it and it's just so much time to the point I actually don't want to be dealing with it. And it definitely puts me off a little bit. And I think some of the trophies are a little harsh. I get possibly they want you to see all the different endings and all that. But yeah, I don't know. I think they've almost made it too difficult. Maybe not difficult, maybe tedious is a better word of putting it. By the end of the platinum, it's really tiring to go through the whole thing. So yeah, it's a point I mentioned to you before, a little analogy, but it's like when you're doing literature back at school and the teacher gets you to, read a book. And it could be a really good book. So for our case, it might be Inspector Calls or Of Mice and Men. But when you read the book so many times, it becomes horrible. Like I hate that book now, Of Mice and Men. I won't go near it. And I feel it might be the same with these games. You're replaying it so many times. And often towards the end, as you've told me, it's to pick up one trophy, doing a whole playthrough for one tiny trophy. And I don't know, that just seems really tedious to me.
Yeah, like in all honesty, I really try to plan out my achievements so that if it's possible, I can do one playthrough but pick up as many as I possibly can. Sorry about that, it's just Bella barking. But in this time, like I've struggled to even do that. I'll do a full playthrough, such as like the heads playthrough, and because of certain head decisions that I made, it actually prevented me from getting any other achievements. Of course, I could then go back to earlier chapters and work my way forward again, but it does get very frustrating. So I think if they could implement a system where you can skip cutscenes, it would actually encourage people to play the game more and to see the hard work that they've done by sort of having these very wide and branching narratives that are impressive and deserve to be seen.
Definitely. And obviously a different game studio, but don't nod or Square Enix do the Life is Strange games. And obviously one thing I like about those games is when you complete it, you unlock a mode called trophy hunting mode or collector's mode. And it actually holds your hand through it, and it tells you where the trophies are, where the secrets you missed are, and you can go back. And someone might say maybe that's too easy, that's holding your hand. But if you finish the game and you quickly just want to get the platinum afterwards, it's such a nice feature they've introduced. And I definitely think Supermassive Games could hold your hand a little more in, reaching the trophies and the platinum afterwards. So yeah, that's just my honest opinion.
Yeah, okay, all right. So we'll move on to number 2 then, which I believe you take slightly more issue with than me, and that's the character faces.
Yeah. Actually, so like with the first point there, it obviously as well ties into the other thing we were going to mention about the cutscenes and skipping them. So obviously, our point is that it's quite tedious to get these trophies. And one thing we mentioned, and a lot of people have shared this opinion that I've heard about who play these games, is you can't skip cutscenes. And when you've played the game the second or third time, this would be such a handy feature that I'm sure we would all love to see. Certain scenes drag on for quite a while, and don't get me wrong, they're amazing when you first play the game to really get immersed in the story. But when you just want to skip the scene, pick up your secrets, get through the game as quickly as possible to reach the choices you want to, it would be a lovely feature to just be able to skip the scenes that you'd like to. And the other thing as well is the walking pace as well, because it really destroys the replay value, in my opinion. We quite like the slow walking pace that you have when you first play the game as well. So you're casually walking through the scenes. There's no option to really sprint. I think in Until Dawn and some of the other games, there was a little button to make you pace up a little bit more. But I would take either or replay or the ability to run faster. And I think it would just make the whole trophy hunting process a lot less tedious. Yeah, I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that point because when I've been going back to get these achievements, actually, you know how you hit LB to put up the flashlight or the lighter to see where you're going.
Yeah.
I've actually been I've not been pushing LB because I'm convinced that it does make you walk a little bit faster purely because I just want to get through the game as quickly as possible to get to the segment where, the achievement, can be got, sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. So I just believe that, the game studio should be aware that when you've completed the game, you don't want to sit through it like a movie again. They have all these trophies they've put out. They've obviously made the platinum a very difficult process. And I don't mind the challenge, but I would like a few things just to make my life easier while I do this. Because, like I say, it just makes the second, third, even fourth, fifth playthrough very tedious. And I'm sure, like you say, it's a slog. And by the end, when you have the platinum, I imagine it's rewarding. You have a sigh of relief. But I imagine it's very painful by the end of the process. And I don't know, I just don't think that should be the feeling you get when you play these games. It should be an enjoyable experience. But, I might be wrong there. That's just my honest opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's sort of like you don't even get anything for sort of completing all the achievements in these games. And on Xbox, it just says, great work, you've got all the achievements, which I suppose isn't really on the developers. I suppose that's on Microsoft or Xbox, to give an incentive to reward you for sort of completing these games. But yeah, okay. Well, do you reckon you're ready to move on to the next point?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, let's go on to point number 2. So it's something that I haven't heard anyone else talk about online. It's just a point that I've come up with myself, and that is the character faces. And I'm not talking about the face models because we covered that in the last episode, and we have mentioned how that's grown on us, and we do believe it's intentional. I'm on about the facial expressions. So so when I played Man of Medan, I brought the game round to a mate's house, and me and 4 other friends played movie night mode. And my friends who don't play these games that often, they were very put off by a lot of the facial expressions. One scene I remember in particular is when you're playing Joe and Charlie at the start, and there's the general, the military general, who's walking down the ship where there's a don't breathe segment, and his facial expressions chop and change very quickly to these ones that don't make any sense. First he's casual, then he's terrified, then he's pulling all these weird faces, and it's just quite off-putting. I don't mind it so much in the sense that it gets rid of the immersive like nature a little bit, but my mates found it funny, and they were actually laughing at a lot of the facial expressions that you see throughout the game. And I guess it just, it's supposed to be a horror game, in my opinion. And if my mate's laughing at some of the faces, I think it is something they will need to work on. So I believe you have a point as well about, yes, something with the faces on Curator's cut, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, so basically, there are moments when you're doing a playthrough when you're not necessarily making the choice, but the camera will zoom in on a particular character's face, and it's quite clear that in Curator's cut, or if you're playing co-op, that is a moment where they're making a choice. And again, some of the facial expressions can be quite bland, and it's just sort of a 2 or 3 second thing that you can feel is quite jarring. So maybe that's something that they should consider cutting out in the future.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously this is quite a small point we had, but it's something that we think they could easily improve on. Some of the face character models just doing weird facial expressions gets rid of like the immersive nature of the game, makes it a bit less flowing. And like I say, if I'm trying to show off this game to some mates and they're laughing at some of the expressions, I mean, maybe that's just something more about like how I need new friends, maybe. But like it's something that I definitely think I somewhat agree on. I think it's something they could definitely improve. But so are you ready to move on to point number 3?
Yeah, man, and this is a big one for me. So I can understand with what they're doing here, because they're almost trying to push the good moral compass. But in these games, obviously, they're really built on the whole idea of the moral compass, good decisions, bad decisions, consequences of both. But a pattern I've noticed in these games is that, and I'm not going to sort of bash Little Hope for this because it was very integral to the story, but in the other games in general, you seem to get rewarded for being heroic and sympathetic all the time, which the fact is in life doesn't work like that. And there should be times where you could be heroic and it could cost someone's life in the game. And I'll sort of go to a specific example in House of Ashes. So you can get Clarice to turn into a vampire and kill Eric. Now, in order for that to happen, you have to be sympathetic on 2 occasions with as Rachel towards her. Then you need her to swing the rope back to her, and then you need 2 more occasions where you're defiant that you're gonna sort of not kill Clarice, and then you need to be optimistic that she'll be okay. So there's sort of 5 choices in a row there, possibly more. It might be a lapse in memory, where you have to, in order for it to go wrong and for her to kill Eric, you need to go that far. Whereas sometimes I think you need to be a bit more cutthroat. Sometimes being the hero isn't the right decision, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, it's a point I completely agree on. So there's only one scene that jumps out of me where you actually get rewarded for being a little selfish, and that's in Until Dawn when you play as Matt and you can possibly save Emily. So you have 2 chances to reach as Emily. If you go for this, if you try to save your girlfriend, you fall in this other place and you can potentially die unless you have a certain item on you. Now, to avoid this, you have to jump to safety and actually betray your girlfriend, arguably, but put yourself first, and that can save you. So that's an element of the story I really liked because it just felt real to me. Yeah, but like you say, you get very rewarded for being heroic, and like you say, it's very integral to Little Hope, because of the story. But yeah, there's a lot of scenes where you could choose to save someone or not save someone. And when I walked into House of Ashes, I felt very much, because of the nature of these games and how the choices go, that you get rewarded for being a good person, for being sympathetic, empathetic, heroic. So it got to the point in House of Ashes where if I'm Jason and could choose to go back for Salim, I would do it without even thinking. Yeah, another point as well. It's the top of my head, but yeah, like I'd always, like you say, chucking the rope to Clarice. I did that instantly because there was no fear. I didn't have any fear that she would come over and, hurt me, even when she was infected. I just assumed, oh, I'll be a good person and it's always going to benefit me. And it really came around to haunt me ever in House of Ashes. So I took a movie as a point. Green Inferno, I was talking about, great horror film if you haven't seen it. But what I loved about that film is there's the villain in the group, the person who betrays people, chucks some of the good guys at the cannibals so he saves his own back. This character doesn't die. He gets all the way to the end. And I loved that because it felt so real to me. And I just feel there should be a point in this game where being heroic actually turns around to bite you, because I'm sure we've all had moments like that in life where we get punished for being a good person. It just feels realistic, and I want to see more of that. And I want to see more of being rewarded for doing bad decisions per se. I don't know, it's a little, not necessarily a rant, something that they could improve on. I just think it's more realistic, and I want to go into game 4 being heroic, and I want it to bite me. I want to get rewarded for making a selfish decision, if that makes any sense to you anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, you'll be dealing with a serial. I mean, we assume it to be a serial killer. So again, the choice to go and save someone might be damaging, or at least it should be damaging, considering the threat that you're up against. So that's probably the big one for me that I'll take moving forward, because yeah, it's the unconventional stories that I think that we appreciate the most. I mean, sort of talking in recent times, I think back to Game of Thrones, like Ned Stark, he's sort of seen as loyal, humble, noble, and he's sort of doing all these right things. And what happens? He gets killed at the end of the series, and it's shocking, and it pulls the rug from you, and you think, wow, it sort of makes you hate other characters more. So it just makes it more engaging, I think.
Agreed. And I just think as the games have gone on, I feel, like I say, I've got my guard down on, watching my back. I just feel being nicer gets you the furthest. So in Until Dawn, obviously, there's the hatch scene where Ashley can possibly die by, saving who she thinks is Jessica, but it ends up being a Wendigo. Now, that's a brilliant choice. I love that they threw that in there. I think it's terrific. One of my favorite parts of the game, as heartbreaking as it is. And I walk into House of Ashes and I've got no fear such as that. And I feel I just want that kind of fear back, where you'll hurt for being a nice person. I don't know. It's just my personal opinion. I'd like to see more of that. But yeah, I'm happy with point 3 there.
All right then. Well, we'll move on to point 4 then. I know I've had a couple of incidents with sort of lags and glitches in House of Ashes, but I believe you have more, if you'd like to go into that.
Yeah, of course. So I've covered them in the past episode, but I'll quickly recap them again. So House of Ashes, massive one for me, and I know a lot of people on Reddit suffered the same. You're Salim, you get one of the Hodgson expeditions in a cell, and Jason is at the door and he won't let you through. Some people have found a way around it, others haven't. I had to reload my checkpoint. It got rid of the immersive nature for me, and it absolutely sucked for me when I had to go back, half an hour and play the same scene again, just because I wanted to pick up a clue for completion, and it haunted me just because Jason was in the way and he was locking Salim in. Or maybe that just says wonders about who Jason is as a person. I don't know. But yeah, I've Man of Medan was very bad for me. Man of Medan was one of the laggiest ones, especially when I played movie night mode. Because I played it solo first, and I barely noticed any issues. But like I say, my friends, same ones who were laughing at the facial expressions, were laughing at a few of the glitches we encountered. One was when we passed the bathroom stores, Alex, and there's a body that you pass, and it's supposed to disappear on your way back, which is the jump scare. It never disappeared, so we just had this zombie-looking guy just staring at us, and I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it was hilarious. And there was one in the med bay where we picked up a clue, and instead of going and looking at the clue from the camera point of view just above this notepad, instead the camera was locked on third person, as Alex still, and you could move the torch around, but it didn't matter because we couldn't see what the note was saying. We were just looking at Alex from afar, rotating this torch randomly. And yeah, the game engine, although like I've noticed less glitches with Little Hope and House of Ashes, the lags are very present, and the House of Ashes one was very annoying. Like I say, it gets rid of the immersive nature, and it's just something that we don't like to see when it sets you back. Yeah, it can be overall frustrating. So, have you experienced many lags and glitches yourself there, Jack?
In House of Ashes, it's been the same sort of glitch twice. It happened to Salim, and it happened with Rachel. And it'll be just after a cutscene. With Rachel, it was when she was wandering through that the pit or the river of blood, whatever you want to call it, and she just climbs over this bit of wood to sort of go into the next section. And I suddenly found that she couldn't move, and I was sort of sat there for ages, sort of thinking, oh, what's going on? But ultimately, I had to back out and go to the menu. And it was the same with Salim as well. I can't remember what sequence, but I think it was him and Jason. And again, a cutscene had just finished, and for some reason he wouldn't start walking. So as you sort of said before, it pulls you out of the game, and obviously because it's a horror, that in terms of genres, horror's probably perhaps the most engaging, I suppose, along with comedy with its audience. So having these little things in there does sort of dilute the impact somewhat.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that one. And it's the kind of thing where I get the game engine's probably improving. I'm seeing less glitches as we go on. But yeah, it just makes the game feel a little bit broken. And like I say, it's just not nice to see. And I know the glitches aren't, there's some really iconic gaming glitches out there. San Andreas, when, you get in a car with the girl and then it freezes the whole game and you can't progress. Fallout 4, when you can't do the railway story because you can't warn Desdemona. There's loads of iconic gaming glitches, and they're not quite as bad where it ruins the game and you have to start again from scratch, or it crashes the game completely. They're little niggly ones, but it's something I would like them to improve on, just to make the engine of the game feel a lot less broken. So yeah, that's point 4. Are you happy to move on to point 5?
Yeah, man, take it away.
Yeah, so point 5 is one that I'm pretty passionate about here. Monotonous scenes. Now, my good friend Anya can definitely confirm this. Until Dawn, we're talking Mike going through the sanatorium. It can drag a lot. In my opinion, with Little Hope, a lot of walking on the streets, which can feel, very tedious at times. House of Ashes, we noticed possibly on the farm, or when you're playing as Jason and Salim. So I'm going to take, for example, Until Dawn, Mike in the sanatorium as an example here. So not only do you have to do this twice in the game, after having done it once already in 2 earlier chapters. So you're walking through, and don't get me wrong, when you play the game for the first time, it's brilliant. You're Mike, you're in the sanatorium, it's scary, there's Wendigos everywhere, you're doing quick time events, you have to save a wolf at a point, possibly anyway. And yeah, it's pretty scary and jarring when you're first playing it. Now, this isn't helped by the fact that when you know the ins and outs of Until Dawn, you know that Mike can't die until the very end of the game. He has to be in the final scene. So it makes it, when you come back to possibly Platinum, so it ties into our first, point, You're playing as Mike in these sanatorium scenes, and you know there's no consequence. You know Mike can't die. The worst that can happen is he might lose a finger, and your wolf companion might die. But you're going through these scenes knowing that nothing's going to happen of it, and they take quite a while to get through. So it makes the replay value, even more horrible, and it's just boring going through them again. There's some very tedious scenes, and I'm not sure if you agree. Are there any scenes in the Supermassive games that you'd say are quite tedious and monotonous to get through?
I suppose looking at House of Ashes, I'd probably say the farm scene. I think one, because it doesn't have any real relevance to the story. I mean, all they're doing is dropping in there, picking up some civilians. Oh, it turns out that they're, heroin smugglers or something like that. They've got a couple of pagan rituals, but it doesn't add anything to the story. And again, you sort of talking about replay value, which they really want to build themselves on these games, as in you can play it more than once and you can experience new things, but each time you play it, you pick up certain mechanics layered into the game, whether it's characters that can get to a certain point or choices that don't really matter from dialogue, that you can really find out that, yeah, it's replayable, but at the same time there is some downside to it. There is some sort of kickback because you sort of have figured out at that point of what's actually doable and what's not really. Trying to think about sort of other games as well, like Until Dawn, when it's the longest walk to.
I was going to mention that as well. It was on my mind. Jess and Mike.
Jess, yeah, and there's presumably this outhouse where they're going to go and bang, and it's the longest walk going, and you sort of think, really, like the Washingtons own this outhouse that's so far away. And don't get me wrong, they're trying to build atmosphere with the whole snow and the dark forest. I was like, God, this is such a long walk. You've got to balance off the atmosphere, but you've also got to make sense in the story as well. It sort of comes back to a point you said in a previous video about that moment when Eric's holding onto the rope in House of Ashes and they're making noise and Dar's just sort of presumably, looking at them not doing anything. There's got to be some level of reality to it. Otherwise, you lose the player.
No, I agree. The Jess and Mike walking to the lodge scene, Mike in the sanatorium, definitely monotonous scenes. And even in the Jess and Mike walking to the outhouse or the lodge, it's a miracle they don't catch frostbite on the way there, or a Wendigo doesn't find them after all the noise and the amount of time it takes for them to get there, while Chris can't pop out the house to go to a shed like once. I get the Wendigos get more present towards the end of the game, but yeah, it does make it a lot more flawed. But yeah, the monotonous scenes, like I say, when you want to go back, maybe get the trophies, it makes the whole thing a lot more tedious. And I think like it ties in again. It probably wouldn't be as bad if you could skip them or maybe sprint, right? Not sprint, but just have a quicker, pace button. Because like replaying the games, it's an absolutely tedious process. And it's something I would like improve myself. So anything else you want to mention there, or are you happy to go to point number 6?
Yeah, I'm happy to move on if you are.
Yeah, definitely. So for point number 6, I've had a few issues with it. I know it's a lot more of an issue for other people that I have played the game with, or that I know that have played the game. But we're going to move on to quick time events now. So, did you want to kick this one off, Jack? Is there anything that annoyed you with quick time events, whether you failed a button mash or there's something you didn't like about it?
Yeah, and it's a very specific example that I have alluded to in a previous video, and it's the bit in House of Ashes where you're planting the dynamite as Nick. Now, there is a question that the brightness is wrong for that moment, so to sort of explain this through, you're planting the dynamite. It's in this very bright green environment because of the cocoons, and a keep calm comes up. Now, I'll mention it again, although I've done it in a previous video, that I saw A come up, and I didn't realise that it was going to be a keep calm segment straight away, because I clearly didn't see the little blue wavy lines or the white line straight away. So I hit A and I completely fucked it up from the get-go. But another part of this as well, when you're doing these keep calms, is that sometimes it lags for me. Like, I'm sort of trying to find a rhythm hitting A, and I'm convinced that I'm getting the white bar in the slot at the right time. But then maybe sort of like when it changes camera angle for when Nick's changing the or doing the dynamite, it does jump a little bit, and it can throw you off. And I'd be mad if I kept everyone alive to that point and then I ended up killing Nick through something like that, and it was only him that died. I'd have been fuming, sort of thing. And I know it was close for you as well, wasn't it, that particular bit?
Yeah, definitely. I struggled to see the white lines myself, because if I remember, the brightness of that scene's quite big. So like, you've got a lot of lime green, as the color that's going on, and I think it shines onto Nick's arm. So his arm's really bright, and then the display menu's white itself. So you've got white display on a white background, and I could tell personally it was the dope briefing, but I was doing it very blind, and it almost, I had to dig up the old like Guitar Hero skills back out, where by the time the X button got to where I was supposed to press it, I was almost doing it based on timing, less of what was in front of me. And I found it really difficult, and I'm not gonna lie, I felt really rewarded when I managed to save Nick at the end there. But I don't think it was supposed to be as hard as it was meant to there, and I just feel it's something, if they was to play test it, they should have noticed and possibly thought, oh, okay, the background's quite bright there, we need to make the display either black or maybe tone down the brightness of Nick's arm, because I know a few people online as well who've had the same complaint. And we have a few of these actually. So obviously that's more to do with a brightness one, but I know a lot of people that have complained about, now this goes for Conrad in Man of Medan. If you get him all the way to the end and you're fighting Olson, a lot of people get crushed on the gate with Conrad, and they complain big time that it's a button mashing one. So I believe you have to hit in the PlayStation case square a lot of times, and a lot of people have complained that they didn't necessarily know it was a button mashing one, so they've simply pressed square, and then by the time they realize it's a button mashing one, they go to do it, but they ran out of time, and then Conrad gets killed, and they're pretty miffed that they've killed off the whole character because of what they feel is a lack of indication. And it's something that you could argue they've possibly improved throughout the other games, because Little Hope and House of Ashes, I saw less of an issue with that. But I do agree that sometimes there is a lack of indication of which kind of exercise you should be doing. So yeah, that's a flaw I'd definitely mention for that one as well. And I think it's worth noting as well, and admittedly, like we said in the past episode, it's something they noticed and they have given us a difficulty saying. But I think we have to mention Little Hope, how easy the quick time events were. So, one notable point is when you're Daniel and Taylor running away on the street from one of the monsters, and you're jumping over the cars, and you've got all the slow-mo cuts. But what is such a well-filmed and, really tense-looking scene with all the music going? It's so easy to hit square, they're done. And they're just jumping over, and I don't know anyone who's killed a character at that scene, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I mean, one, it might not even be possible, but you've just reminded me of something that, yeah, it's that scene in general makes me laugh whenever I play it, because yeah, they're really sort of drumming home this sort of seriousness, that they're running away, they're jumping over things. And when I've played that back, I've purposely like fucked up on those bits, because the thing is,
okay.
the creature is moving so slow. But then each time it then cuts back, the creature somehow gained on them, even though it's walking like 5 miles an hour. They're sprinting down the road, and yet we're led to believe that this thing's somehow catching up with them. You then put the quick time events into that mix. If anything, they really need you to fail them quick time events to justify it catching up to them. Really?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And you know, one thing that I will say the QuickTime events they have benefited on, Until Dawn had the Don't Breathe segments, and I felt these were very broken. When I completed the game and I did the end scene where you have to stay still where the Wendigos are looking at you, it's very tense, a lot more tense than the breathing sequences, I'd say. Uh, Especially, there's this iconic scene where the Wendigo looks through the camera right at you while you're trying to not move the controller, straight up screams at Sam, and then looks at you, and I believe it screams at the camera. And if you don't move a muscle, it's the most rewarding feeling when you save Sam. However, there are times where I've replayed it, and I swear, hand on heart, that I've kept the controller so still, and somehow it says I've moved and I've got a character killed or captured or bitten or whatever it is. And I did feel it was a very broken little mini game. So when Man and Medan came in, they introduced the don't or the brief timer segments. And admittedly, so we've mentioned that you had the issue with Nick, and you know I do agree the brightness could have been better there. I do think it is a much better game. You've definitely got a lot more control over it because it's down to timing rather than stillness, which you know with controller vibrations and a bunch of other external factors, you know, a lot of that can be out of your control, and it is annoying when it's such a grave decision where you could potentially kill a character off and it could ruin your whole story potentially. So yeah, I hear a lot of people complain about a lot of the quick time events, and it's something they're constantly changing, which is nice to see. They obviously do listen to their audience, and it is something they do want to improve on. But I still think they have a little way to go, whether that's changing a lot of the quick time events, because I did feel House of Ashes was a little heavy on just the mashing. I thought, you know, it could have done more things. Um, and if we take another game, for example, so Quantic Dreams, they do a lot of these quick time events, and I think they do them very well because if you look at a game like Heavy Rain, you've got different exercises where with the PlayStation Move, where it could be moving the controller, it could be rotating, you know, the analog sticks, it could be simple button tapping in quick time events as well as button mashing. There's different ones as well where you've got, if you're climbing, for example, you have to hold buttons together. So maybe you've got to press L1, then R1, then R2, and you're running out of fingers and you have to like plan about how you're going to hold these buttons on the controller. There's definitely a few different things they could try and get around with, but I'd like to see more from them as well with QuickTime events. So it's not just an issue of the brightness or the engine being slightly broken. You know, I'd like to see a lot more from QuickTime events, especially when these games are almost like movies and some of the only play value we have are the choices, the walking around and picking up clues, and the QuickTime events. That I feel these, because we have so few playability elements, I feel these need to be very strong. And it's something I would like to see a lot more strength with.
Yeah, I think you're right, especially when when you talk about the variety of the quick time events, the rotating, the analogs. I mean, that's something that I take it is in the likes of Detroit Become Human. So when we cover that, that will be something that's relatively new for me, which actually is quite exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember when I first played Fahrenheit, and in the tutorial they strongly say that when you open a door, for example, it's, for example, you've got to move the analog just slightly to the right, and the minute you hit the end as far as the analog can go, you've fully opened the door, and then it will go into like the animation. But you can like move the analog back and forth without fully completing it, and it really makes it feel like you're controlling the door because you can constantly span backwards and forwards, and your character's moving it with it, and it feels so immersive, like you have complete control of the actions. And yeah, for example, I look at these Supermassive games, and I just like to see more than hit square or button mash X now because the monster's coming. I felt in the last one maybe it did suffer strongly from lack of variety in the quick time event exercises. So yeah, definitely something they could improve on. And I see other games doing all these different things. You know, even Last Up actually do a few things like that. And yeah, it's something that they could potentially improve on for sure. Yeah. So yeah, did you want to anything else to build on that?
No, I don't think so, mate. Yeah, we can move on to the final point.
Yeah, so our final deadly sin. So lack of curator, which is something that you're gonna spearhead this one with. So yeah, lack of curator, Jack. What's this one about?
Yeah, so maybe I suppose it's really in comparison to Man of Medan and Little Hope. But whenever it come to a curator scene, it felt significant because he was sort of dropping these sort of quotes, whether it was Shakespeare or some other famous literary scholar or something along those lines. And when you go back to play them at a later point, and obviously if you do a bit of research, you'll start to pick up on the references that he's saying in relation to the story in the game. So ultimately you can walk away feeling satisfied. um Whereas in this one, I don't know, the time with the curator felt a bit shorter. It was very cut and dry. You sort of get into a cut scene. I think there's only one time in this where you get offered the chance to take a hint, whereas in others there's been two. But yeah, it's sort of very much he's providing a quick commentary on what's happened. Oh, so and so's died, so and so's fallen into the darkness. But I'm not going to hold you anymore because we've run out of time, and then you're straight back into the game. So I suppose I'd like a little bit more curator. Having said that, there were sort of bits in there that piqued my interest. I.e., when the camera's panning round, the curator's to the left, and he goes off camera. You then see this crow fly across, and as the camera pans round to the right, he's there again, which I find interesting. And maybe moving forward in these games, they can explore the relevance of the curator, which I hope there is more to him than just being a custodian for these stories. Um, but yeah, it felt a bit light in this one. What about you?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously, when we first got Man and Medan, I thought it was brilliant because obviously we've got this British narrator voiced by Pip Torrens, and it tied everything together so well. So especially in comparison to Until Dawn, and I'm not sure if I'm wrong in saying this, but I remember that when they added Dr. Hill, it was quite a last minute addition, and Until Dawn was famous for constantly being delayed as a game. And apparently they added that in last minute, and I thought it was brilliant to the point. I'm glad they delayed it to add that bit in. And when we got these dark picture games, obviously we've got the curator, and it's brilliant. You've got this British voice; he's so intriguing. You've got obviously Lacrimosa playing in the background, and the scenes are quite jarring, and it's very eye-catching, isn't it? And when Man of Medan first came, I loved it. I thought, it tied out from Until Dawn very well. Yeah, we had it for Little Hope as well. And I agree, when I played House of Ashes, it felt very rushed. Like you say, we only had one clue when we usually get two. I barely remember him in it. I remember the quote about the blind poet, but maybe it's because with Man of Medan we were getting introduced to him, so maybe it's natural when they see longer scenes with him. But yeah, I'm starting to fear how they're going to end it with the curator. And here's a question I have for you. So if the curator, his scenes are simply as we see them now in House of Ashes, where he'll introduce the story, he'll make the odd comment, he'll drop an odd clue, and then it just ends, and the whole series ends where we don't know anything else about him. Now, would you feel underwhelmed by that?
Yeah, yeah, I would
So
definitely.
you definitely you want to see more of the curator, you want to know more about his story, who he is. Otherwise, you think it's an absolute waste.
Perfect scenario for me would be, yeah, as these games go on, very much like they did in Until Dawn, each segment you had with Dr. Hill, you started to clock on that actually he was relevant to the story. And I think that the curator, I hope, has relevance going forward. So if they could drip feed these little things that can sort of whet your appetite, and then maybe in the final game, the eighth game in the anthology, you could really start to see where the curator fits in. You might even, I'm speculating now, but maybe you could have a moment where you're walking round his repository. I mean, that would be pretty cool. You can sort of walk
That would be
around
interesting.
and see, all the different books, the different stories, where he's walking in the introduction with the sort of semi-music video thing they have going on. So yeah, I would be underwhelmed, and I do hope they follow the same path as Until Dawn, where he's relevant in the series.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'd have to agree with that. And to be honest, I don't have much more to comment on. It's one of those ones where I do agree, House of Ashes, I would have liked to have seen more from him. And it is a potential massive flaw to me. A lot's going to jar on how the series ends and if they do anything with him. Because I think I agree. I think I would feel very underwhelmed too if it's just like this forever. I want to see more of him. I want to know what his role is. And we have discussed this as well, but it's potentially the next or one of the future videos we're going to do. We'd love to explore more about the Curator, who he is, and the theories around him, and what relevance he's going to play. Because we're not going to mention it now, but we have a few theories already, and we'd love to explore them more with you, obviously. But yeah, so yeah, those are 7 flaws that we've got, 7 deadly sins about the Supermassive Games. Yeah, but I don't know if anyone agrees with them per se. Perhaps they have more to add. We've got a few more that didn't quite make the cut because there are really tiny ones. One that we mentioned in the last episode was the confined camera angles, for example, with House of Ashes. You know, in the dark caves and in Salim's house especially, we found it very hard to navigate around. Felt like we were possibly missing secrets and clues because the camera was just so tightly third person hugged to the characters that we struggled to navigate around. And I don't know, it took the kind of immersive nature out of the game for me as well with that one. I don't know if you felt the same for that one as well.
Yeah, the sort of things we've covered in other episodes, sort of, yeah, the camera work, the pacing, I think, not so much with this one, but certainly the first 2 games were a bit of an issue. But yeah, I mean, as much as we say these things, look, we both sit here and still think that House of Ashes is a solid game. It's a it's an 8 out of 10. So what we're saying really is if you sort of address these things that we've sort of listed in the video, then you're making a perfect game. And obviously, like where Until Dawn, it does get sort of 9s, 10 out of 10, doesn't it? And I think part of that perhaps is due to its length. Sort of it buys them more time, but there's nothing to say that you can't make a shorter game but still have the same rating of a 9 or 10 out of 10.
Yeah, agreed. And yeah, and obviously, like I said, 2 points that strongly would have made the list as the biggest 2 flaws, but House of Ashes saved it from happening. For me, definitely was the fake out endings, which we mentioned big time. I wasn't a fan of them being back to back because I was scared it was going to be a one-trick pony, as I mentioned a million times before. But also the same face models. Before we thought potentially it's lazy casting, using the same faces. Now that it's happening so much, we are believing, yeah, obviously it's intentional. And you know, it reminds me of American Horror Story, and it is actually growing on me a lot more. So those 2 sins that we were thinking of throwing in, but House of Ashes saved them from making, you know, the list because the cons there have possibly become pros now. So yeah, you know, obviously there's a few different things to talk about, but that was our 7 that we came up with. But yeah, no, I'm pretty happy with that. Things I would like to see changed. Hopefully they do. And obviously as we play these games in the future, we'll go back and we'll see if these have improved. It might be interesting actually if we revisit the 7 in the way future, and then we can see if it's something that's changed, if it's still the same. So yeah, I'd love to explore it again.
Yeah, definitely. I think that would be quite interesting because they do seem to be developers that respond to community feedback. I mean, look at the whole difficulty setting thing, for example. They've implemented that the 360 camera when you're sort of, you know, out in open spaces, you can rotate. So they're clearly interactive in that sense, and hopefully some of these points can find them, or you know, if you've got the same points or if you've got different points, please leave them in the comment section. We'd like to know what they are. Then it can help drive the conversation to get these changes put in and ultimately get a better game.
Because Supermassive are brilliant for that. Like you mentioned, they do listen to their community. They do change the games. Like we said, one of the biggest things they have done is they realised people were handing the controller between their mates at Until Dawn, which is a single player game. So because of that, Man of Medan onwards, they incorporated movie night mode, and story mode, that kind of thing. So, they are a brilliant game developer who do listen to their customer feedback. So yeah, if obviously if Supermassive Games are looking, yeah, please let us skip cutscenes. You give us faster walking paces, cut out the monotonous scenes, and maybe reward us for being selfish a bit more. That's some points.
What a lovely note to end on. Let
Definitely.
us be a bit selfish more.
Yeah, let me be selfish. More of the story. I'm done being nice. I want to be rewarded for like not going to save characters. But yeah, okay. So I'm happy to wrap up there.
Yeah, same here, man. Good to talk again as per usual, and we'll be back next time with a new video on the Butterfly Effect podcast. Bye, guys.
Yeah. Thank you very much, guys. Take care.